Hey, Art Angle listeners, we're excited to share the Roundup is going to be live at this year's Independent 20th Century Art Fair. Join Ben, myself, and a special guest in New York on Saturday, September 6th at 5 p.m. for a special recording. Come be a part of the audience and hear and contribute to the conversation as it happens. All the ticket details are in the show notes. We can't wait to see you there.
The art is coming from a really pure space that's unadulterated, I guess, and really for like a much smaller, more specific purpose, to bring joy to my community, to bring joy to myself and to my community.
I'm Ben Davis, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast from ArtNet News. If you want to know which artist is having the biggest year in museums, there's one name that springs to mind for me, Cara Romero. Since her first big breakout a decade ago at Santa Fe Indian Market, Romero has been steadily growing in influence. If you don't know it yet, her photo-based art is full of color, drama, and detail. It's sometimes funny, sometimes fantastical, and it moves between a variety of themes that are extremely important in museums right now. Indigenous identities, environmental concern, science fiction, and staged or set-up photography, to name a few. For that reason, Romero finds her work part of many surveys and touring exhibitions at the moment. She had this year a mid-career retrospective at the Hood Museum at Dartmouth called Cara Romero, Panapunuwugai, meaning living light. She also has a two-person spotlight alongside her husband, the artist Diego Romero, called Tales of Future Past, currently at the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento. For someone who has risen to the very top of the museum circuit, Romero has had a unique career path and story, and I'm excited to get into what that has been. Well, Cara Romero, thank you for calling in.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And where are you calling in from?
I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've lived here most of my adult life.
So I do these lists every 3 months about where I look at which artists are showing at which museums and try and figure out which artists are being shown in the most places. And all this year, your name has come up the most. I'm always curious, do you feel that? Do you feel like you're having a moment or you're at the center of attention right now?
I do. It's honestly a bit overwhelming, but exciting. I just feel like it's taken me further than I ever imagined. And so I do enjoy it in a really sweet, humble way. And I think for me, the best part is the visibility and the shared storytelling with my community. So it feels like a big deal for more than myself.
You studied cultural anthropology at the very beginning, I understand. And I wanted to get into your origin story a little. How did you end up becoming an artist? What is your background?
So I think as far back as I can remember, I was definitely a maker. It was always just a best friend. I was the kid that was always drawing, always enjoying art projects in school. I don't think I was ever really encouraged to do it. I was very much an athlete, and school was my sanctuary. And as I made my way really on my own through community college and into the university, I was a liberal arts major. I was kind of meandering around, if you will. And I was really interested in cultural anthropology, things like sociology. I think back to those times and I always felt like a little bit of an odd birdie or an outsider to the information that was being shared. And I think certainly became interested in the absence of living Native American representation in all of those settings, in American history, in archaeology, in anthropology. And at that point, I wished for something that I never had growing up, which was the beauty that I experienced growing up on the reservation. And as fate would have it, I stumbled into a black and white film class in about 1997, 1998 with a guy named Bill Thomas. And the medium itself just helped me kind of sing all of the things that I didn't have words for. And I'm so thankful for that time in my life. I think we look back at the long, strange journey, but for me, that was it. I changed my life at that point. I ran off to art school here in Santa Fe to go to the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I studied black and white film.
So you started out in black and white film. That's very interesting because I feel like now you're really known for just the incredible color of your photography.
I would agree with that. And I think, as we journey as artists, we continue to learn all sorts of techniques. I think we start from a place where we admire people's work, and then we look at our own work and we say, actually, I'm better at this than that. And, maybe my peers are better at that. I can think of some of my friends that I think can see more colors in black and white than variations of black and white. And color was really a strength for me. But I came from a school where if it doesn't work in black and white, it doesn't work in color. So there's definitely a graphic philosophy with my color work that's rooted in black and white. And I can do both. I think for a lot of the storytelling and the psychology of color, it became something that I really wanted to see in my own community. There was some kind of pushback for me where it's hard for black and white not to have that antiquing effect on human beings. And I think we love that. But for Native people, we've really been wanting to be seen as living human beings. The color and the use of lighting, it does that kind of instantly in a subconscious psychological way.
I've heard you talk about your relationship to the photography of Edward S. Curtis, who listeners may know for his very famous portraits from the 19th and early 20th century of Native Americans. I know you have a complex relationship with them, and I was thinking Curtis is famous for depicting Native people with dignity, but also as symbols of a vanished past or romanticized authenticity as if they're from another world. And then your works are very poppy, very contemporary. They have all these staged or set up elements. His works are in sepia. Yours really emphasize this vibrant color. So it's almost to me as if you were reacting to these historic representations by reversing all their values. Am I right?
I would say even my origin story is rooted in looking at the work of Edward Curtis. Starting out wanting to make photographs of my community, I think everybody in the world knows those photographs. And they're so beautiful. They're a cultural resource to Native people also. They're a precious connection to our past, to peoples that were going through extraordinary changes to their lives. And I think it captured the world's imagination and stopped time the way photography does. And there's kind of a few things going on. We don't have access as Native people for a very long time to the tools to make our own stories through photography. It's a complicated, expensive medium. I think that's the reason a lot of people from marginalized communities don't get to make their own photos. It's just the expense of it. We're finally able to tell our own stories. But starting out, I was really emulating some of the stuff that Curtis was doing. And that's a lot to unpack as a young person. Why are we taking photographs of our community devoid of modern context? I think that there's an edit that happens when people from outside of community are taking photographs of another culture. And I'm just observant of it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's different. And so to expand people's viewpoints of culture, it's really important not just to see what outside culture believes is interesting about that culture, but also the nuance and sense of humor and beauty of people telling their own stories, I think is really rich context for people to lend ideas of humanity to people that need a deeper insight towards.
Are there other big influences on you as a photographer?
I think it's always changing. And I remember being really struck by Laura Gilpin's work when I had run off to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, looking at the other Native photographers that were making work in the 70s and 80s. Zig Jackson, Lee Marmon, Shelley Nero, Hulea Tsinajini. That was really meaningful for me as a young person to know that this was possible. There is a lot of, I think, outside pressure or categorization of what is Native art and what is not Native art. And so without those people really forging a path for younger photographers like myself, I don't know that I would have been able to do what I've done.
For people who don't know it, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that institution where you studied.
Sure. The Institute of American Indian Arts is a tribal college here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it was founded in the late 50s. And it is the only formal art training specifically for Native American students. So natives come from around the country, from Alaska, from the Northern Plains, from New York, from California, from New Mexico, from the Southeast to come together and learn art and get formally trained in everything from photography to jewelry, sculpture, painting, ceramics, all of the arts that come from our communities, and then really has expanded to being able to get your master's of fine arts here, Indigenous liberal studies, museum studies. So it's a tremendous resource to Native America.
So, how did your work then develop? I know that you've talked about water memory from 2015 as a very key work that essentially changed your career. What is that series? How did you arrive at it?
I would go back a little bit to the origin story of after I finished school at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I lived during a time period where it straddled the transition from film to digital. And at the very beginning, if you were a fine artist, you rejected any kind of digital workflow. And it really had a stigma in the early 2000s of being for something very specific, not for fine art. In journalism, I think it became much faster to report for newspapers, that sort of thing. But I found myself at a vocational school in Oklahoma and got another degree in photography technology. I had the narrative, I had the ability to tell stories, but I was not as left brained as a lot of photographers. So the technology was a deep study for me. It took me a long time to catch up and to learn how to use all of the different tools that the medium had to offer. And so I really, for my own reasons, wanted to learn more about the technology of photography. And part of that curriculum was to learn everything digital aside large format film. That's kind of what was going on. Nobody knew if film was forever. Digital had not caught up yet as far as the beauty, the aesthetics, the resolution. And having trained in both, my mind began to work in both. And I came back after I had my first son to make fine art, and I wanted to participate in Santa Fe Indian Market. And it was a really gentle way for me to not give up, to be able to continue to participate in community and to make fine art pieces for a specific exhibition every year. I started back in 2012. The content was really for my own community. I mean, thousands of Native Americans come in to Santa Fe, to the Santa Fe Indian Market to self-represent and to bring their very best artwork. It's very unedited. It is very diverse in all of its formats. But for me, it was the dream as a young person. If I could participate in Santa Fe Indian Market, that was the highest level that you could get as a contemporary Native artist. And so I did that with love. I still do that with love. And I had built this body of work that my own community really responded to. I think there were a couple of things going on. One of them is we hadn't seen ourselves in color and really, really highly produced photography. Native people can look at my work and instantly tell it's from inside of community. There's just a lot of things going on there. And I felt challenged. I felt like all of a sudden I had found my voice and that I could make work for my own community. And that was very liberating. I would say the other thing that was going on is I didn't think I was ever going to make it as a fine art photographer. So it was kind of like I had nothing to lose. I could make whatever kind of work that I wanted. And that can feel daunting in the time, but you can turn around and be like, oh, I was innovating. The art is coming from a really pure space that's unadulterated, I guess, and really for like a much smaller, more specific purpose to bring joy to my community, to bring joy to myself and to my community. So water memory, I've always done activism as well. And I was really learning stories about climate change and how to articulate that Native peoples live closer to their natural ecosystems and how we are affected by climate change in more impactful ways than other communities because we live so close to our ecosystem still. And I talk story with my friends, and there were stories of flooding here in New Mexico. There are stories of sea level rising, of seasons changing. And I kind of just had this moment where they were floating kind of in a free fall underwater. And sometimes when an idea comes like that, I can really, really see it in my mind's eye. And I want to fan the embers and go for it. And I think it stayed with me, and I had to figure out two things. One, how to do it. And the second, what does it mean? And so certainly it stemmed from this idea of flooding and sea level rising. And on the other side, I began to think of historic flooding. My tribe had been flooded out of our ancestral homelands, and I knew 3 or 4 other friends and family who had also been flooded out of their ancestral homelands by the damming of the rivers and the U.S. energy security's need for hydroelectric energy. They declared native lands eminent domain and flooded us out. And when I go home to Lake Havasu, I feel all of that history in the lake. Like when we go swimming, I feel all of that water memory. And so that was all of the information that was happening in my mind when I went down to the swimming pool with some friends that had also been affected by flooding, either historically or in contemporary climate change ways. And we made a series of photographs of Native people from different tribes free falling underwater. It was the first time I ever learned to invest in myself, invest in the art making process. And so I think that that was a critical moment for me. I would have never imagined in a million years that 8 years later it would end up in the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
There are these almost surreal tableau of, figures sort of weightlessly, but in full regalia, underwater. They're quite extraordinary images, very technical to shoot. I mean, shooting underwater like that.
I have a lifelong love of learning, and I would say technical and fascinating. They basically make underwater housing for your camera. It's like a little scuba outfit for your camera where you can still control all of the settings. And it has like a dome and a watertight housing that goes over your camera. So the next part is trying to figure out how to stay still, whether you're going to scuba dive or whether you're going to free dive. And I'm a water person, so that was really fun to figure out. They've been done a couple of different ways. The Water Memories was shot in tandem with the scuba diver. So sitting on the bottom of the swimming pool for long periods of time. And then I learned to free dive later on.
Did they debut at the Santa Fe Indian Market?
Water Memory debuted at Santa Fe Indian Market in 2015.
And what was the reaction to it?
I think I remember very clearly that one of my mentors and really well-known artist, Tony Abeda, an amazing painter, came by and bought number one. And there was something about that affirmation from Tony that was very meaningful. And then the Smithsonian came by later that weekend and inquired about the series, and they acquired the series. And that was the biggest museum acquisition that I could have ever imagined.
I wanted to ask you about Santa Fe Indian Market. I know you're preparing for it right now as we speak, and it is kind of extraordinary. If you look at your CV, you've won prizes at it year after year as a photographer. It's a very big art event, maybe the biggest art event in the United States, but I think a lot of people outside the Native art community don't know it. They don't understand how big and powerful it is. It really did support you, and it was through that you've now become, a very important artist in museums all across the United States, but it really started there. It's very interesting.
It really started here, I think, in those small ways, allowing me to make work towards a purpose every year.
And that same year, you have another famous work by you, The Last Indian Market, which I guess reflects that community. So maybe tell me about that.
The Last Indian Market was completed in 2014, and it is...
So a little before, actually.
Yeah, it was done the year before. It was done during a time where I think I had found my voice. And the image is so interesting. It's a parody of Da Vinci's Last Supper. It is a homage to performance artist Buffalo Man, who's a local icon, and placing him in iconic imagery was really the impetus for the photograph. And everybody that's in the photograph is a really well-known artist and cultural contributor to Native America. And it was the largest production that I had done to date. It was done in a local restaurant on a Sunday afternoon. We came together very quickly and made the image, but it was really the impact in the community that it was instantly beloved. And sometimes when you make art, you have an experience while you're making it, and then you have this experience after it goes out and lives in the world, and both can be equally as impactful. That one, the community response to it was deeply impactful to me, to make me feel like I was going in the right direction with voice and with that use of technology and color. And we had never seen ourselves with that kind of lighting. And it was from inside of culture, no doubt about it. It was like, this is not what's interesting about Native people, that edit from the outside. It was, hey, we have this incredible sense of humor. We're astute in Western art and pop culture. And here's an indigenized version of all the things that we experience as Native people. And for that, it was really important. I hung on to that part of my voice for the rest of the years.
So it's interesting that technology keeps coming up, or you're bumping up against technology and pushing its limits, because another idea or theme in your work that's important is Indigenous futurisms. You have a series called that, which, when did it debut? 2018?
That sounds about right. Maybe a little bit after that. It was a genre that is emerging, Latin futurism, Afrofuturism, Indigenous futurism. I think Grace Dillon first coined the term through a novel, and artists began responding. And so much of my life was about that mantra, we are still here. This comes out of the American Indian movement during the civil rights movement. And we didn't ever disappear. We were never erased. We're present day people existing, thriving, flourishing, rich in culture, rich in lands. It's like such an overt omission to realize we're never depicting ourselves in the future. And that for me was the most exciting to unpack. Why don't we imagine ourselves in the future? If we do imagine ourselves in the future, what does that look like? And so, really looking at other artists in my community's response to the movement. And some of it is post apocalyptic for sure. For me, I really wanted to insert this take about all of the leadership, all of the Indigenous science that's undervalued, all of this traditional ecological knowledge that goes undervalued in Western science. But within our own communities, there's this understanding that it's the highest form of science, of interrelatedness and ecosystem. So the importance of basket making, the importance of heirloom corn really signify this tremendous interconnectedness, if you will, of our dependence on localized arts. So in each of my Indigenous futurism pieces, there's speculative futurism, maybe an edge of campiness, which I love. Just that's what we do when we imagine the future. But it's not really about technology at all. It's not about AI. It's not about how fast our transportation is going to be or electric vehicles. It's really rooted in this idea of we're in real trouble if we can't grow our corn that we've grown for thousands of years and are in our creation stories.
Maybe the most circulated image from that series is Three Sisters, which maybe describe that because there's some tech. It is like there's wires in it. It's actually a very glamorous photo in its way. But at the same time, yeah, it has these elements of traditional culture and knowledge in it. How did that photo come to be?
It came out of a time where I really needed to play. And I was really not concerned about where it was going to be seen or what was going on. I wanted to try something different. And sometimes looking back, those are the best places to start your art making from. And they're painted in blue light. So I'm using gels for them to appear in blue. And the wires coming in speak to that idea of not information coming in and that type of connectedness, but really the need for people and planet. They're going to need the knowledge of Indigenous peoples in order to survive. And so that's what the wires are representing. And then I digitally illustrated all of their really, really old designs onto their skin. So they look tattooed, but they're tattooed with really old vernacular from each of their individual communities. So there's Ojibwe floral, and there's ancestral Puebloan, and there's Comanche parfleche designs from left to right. And these are designs and visual vocabulary that have also been around for a very long time, protected through really unspeakable and unbelievable times that our ancestors have gone through. Our designs survive.
So, as we speak, I believe your retrospective, you have a mid-career retrospective at the Hood Museum that's just about to close, and you have a two-person show with your husband, who's also an artist, Diego Romero, that's touring the country. How did these things all come together at one time?
So I was working with Jamie Powell and John Stomberg from the Hood on Panapu Nuwugai. It's a Chimwavy combination of words that translates as living light or the spirit of light.
Right. This is the name of the Hood Museum show. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had been working on that since 2022. Diego and I were approached to do a two-person show much later. It opened a little bit after the Hood show, and it's much smaller. It's a much smaller kind of one gallery combination of our pieces, and that's at the Crocker Museum right now, and we'll travel to Albuquerque Museum. The first one is really a survey of about 13 or 14 years of work. So kind of where we started at that restart at Santa Fe Indian Market in 2012. And looking back, somehow I had about 65 pieces that are all centered on Indigenous storytelling and identity and just 1,000 narratives. And my husband is this incredible artist. I'm just his biggest fan. We have so much in common and speak about art all the time. And the show that we're in together is really got a lot of amazing psychological lines of ideas that show up that really resonate off of each other. So autobiography, love, Indigenous futurism, retelling of American history are things that I think just live in us. And we're telling our own kind of renditions of those stories.
He works in the tradition of Pueblo pottery. And in the way that you in photography have this eye for artifice and color, he also puts a very pop art spin on that tradition, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Diego started out as an illustrator and a comic book artist. So I feel like there's this just like collision of this incredible two-dimensional narrative that goes into this traditional narrative medium. It's like Cochiti, it's Mimbris, it's his own, and it's figurative.
I'm looking at the image right behind you
Yeah,
that
he's
he
just
did of you as Wonder Woman.
a lithograph. Yeah, he's an incredible artist. And I think that was part of the attraction is we had so much in common. We're both born to interracial parents in California, both have an urban experience, a reservation experience. So we're really kind of making art, that intersectional art that is our truth.
And this specificity of that experience, people can paint with a very broad brush about, Native American people. I mean, even you talk about Indigenous futurisms, not Indigenous futurism. And I'm thinking here also of your first American Girl series, which you have new versions of in the Hood Museum show, which is very specifically about the specificity of different kinds of experience, correct?
Yeah. We have thousands of stories, and we really try and counter that, one story narrative. Those can be dangerous and they can cause, I think, misunderstanding and misrepresentation. And it's far more fascinating to think of us as hundreds and hundreds of diverse communities because we are so connected to our landscapes also. Each one of our Indigenous communities globally emerge out of our different ecosystems. That's part of being Indigenous is being akin to the different bioregions and things like that. That means our art is all different and our language is all different and our diaspora and impacts of American colonialism are all different. And so like I said, have a lifelong love of learning. And so a lot of it for me is also learning other people's stories here in this intertribal community that is Santa Fe.
And so maybe just describe this series, though, the first American Girl series, because it's funny, right? I mean, but it's also serious.
Diego collects vintage G.I. Joes, and his mom collected dolls before him. And the first one came out in 2015, and our daughter was then 11 years old. And she's really a daddy's girl and wanted to also take on this doll collecting. Some of Diego's G.I. Joes are in the box and such love for historical accuracy and detail. The buttons, the boots, the artillery that they were carrying and whatever war they're representing. And that really fascinated me. But our daughter had one Native American doll. It was a American Girl doll that was Ojibwe, and that was it. And sometimes we would make Coachiti clothes for her. And that was really kind of what sparked it. And so we created a life-size doll box and began this series of different dolls that represented the really beautiful but quite drastic differences between communities. And I thought someday when they're all in the same room, they're going to be this really expansive, powerful learning tool cross-culturally for people to quickly understand and begin to identify people from different communities. It's something that we can do within Native America. We know when things are Oglala or Lakota or Cochiti or Ojibwe or Anishinaabe or Cree. We have a really astute knowledge of that visual vernacular. And so each woman is self-representing in their different boxes. They get to choose their cultural accoutrement that surrounds them. And in that way, their diversity comes through.
So you worked with students at Dartmouth, yeah, where Hood Museum is, to create new versions of this for the show?
I did get to work with the students at Dartmouth. They could make whatever type of photograph that they wanted to make with me, and they chose the first American doll series. And they also chose to do some underwater pieces. And I worked specifically with the Kanaka Maoli students, the Hawaiian students, which was important because it's bringing them into the conversation of being Native American, where they often are not included because they have different political status. And so that gets a little bit complicated. But I think as Indigenous peoples to the Americas, we very much consider Kanaka Maoli Native Americans and Indigenous to this greater United States. And so it was an incredibly moving experience for me to be able to include them in the breadth of the work that was about representation.
You've already mentioned the importance of self-representation, and I wanted to ask you about Cara Romero Photography, which is your gallery, which is interesting to me because of the themes of your work, that also you have your own institution, gallery that represents yourself. Is that important to you? How did you come to found that?
That's been an incredible journey. My career does really emerge out of Santa Fe Indian Market, which is self-representation. And I still do work with some galleries nationally. I was working out of a studio and, as part of Santa Fe Indian Market, I would do a studio show, if you will. And that happened for about 4 or 5 years in a row. And what I began to feel was this love for collectors. They became like family. They're moms and dads and aunties and grandparents and are deeply impactful to us as artists. There's such like a caring that happens when you're sharing your artwork and people, want to take that home and live with it. But people love studio tours, whether it's museum curators or human beings, they want to come in and see how you're making. And so the gallery is both. It's project space. It's where I print all of my own work on the side and in the back, and then exhibition space in the front. I have been kind of a self-made learning the entrepreneurial side of artwork since I've been a mom, and really for like the last 13 or 14 years. And I was able to invest my money locally and buy the space. And so once I was able to get the space established on my own, I began to share the space. And so now I do group shows here at the gallery. I'm either have my own artwork up with staff that runs the gallery, or I have a group show up, and really excited about that next evolution of being able to share the space. And so New Mythos is our show opening August 14th, 2025. And we have 8 artists that will blow your minds when you come to Santa Fe Indian Market.
That's what you've been working on. I know you've been working late nights to put this together. That's your presentation for Indian Market this year?
That is. And I meant to tell you, I shot film for the first time in 18 years. I am shooting black and white film and working in alternative processes. So I'm really excited for the community to see me get back to my origin story.
Oh, well, back to the origins, but also exploring new things. I guess that's the sort of dialectic of your work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's a great pleasure. You have a very unique trajectory and story that I hope is inspiring to people in terms of there are many different ways to do this art thing. And I really appreciate you talking to me.
Thank you, Ben, for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
That is it for this week's episode. If you like what you've heard, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, please take a moment to rate and review our show. It helps other listeners discover what we're doing. The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Manalili, with contributions from Kate Brown, Ben Davis, Caroline Goldstein, and Naomi Ray. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.